Good morning, St. Mark's, and our friends who may be joining in either today or along the way. We provide these midweek extras because we want you to continue to be informed and inspired by certain issues that we have to contend with. Not all difficult issues, some of them festive, and we hope there's a broad range of things that we can encounter. Today, we have a special guest. I'll introduce him in a moment. But the whole issue here was raised by one of our members who asked that we have somebody in who's an expert on gambling, believing that that was an increasing problem. And I think Hector will affirm that. At the same time, I plead with you to give me some ideas about who you would like to hear from or what topics you would like to hear from, because I can do my best to honor those things within the limits of my ability and my capacity to move around this community again and anew. As most of you know, I haven't been here for a while. So we'll get started here now. I know you'll be inspired by this in a way that increases your knowledge of a very real problem. And we have with us Hector Garcia, and Hector is with the Delaware Council on Gambling Problems, Inc., and he can tell you about his particular duties in just a minute. Hector, welcome to St. Mark's Lutheran Church.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. I believe with the person who asked us to have you or someone in your capacity that has valid reasons for being concerned. Hector, just tell us whatever you want to tell us about yourself first.
Okay. Well, I work for the Delaware Council on Gambling Problems in two capacities. I sort of wear two hats. The first one, I'm the Director of Treatment Expansion Services. That simply means I do a lot of driving. I go to about 30 different drug and alcohol / mental health organizations, and I educate them about gambling. I screen clients, offer trainings for the staff. I have put together a certification program and currently have 50-something counselors throughout the state of Delaware in the process of becoming nationally certified gambling counselors. The other capacity that I work in, I'm one of only 8 treatment providers throughout the state of Delaware. We offer treatment services for gamblers and their families, not just for people who live in Delaware, but if you gamble in Delaware, you're afforded these services. They're free and confidential. And not just for the gamblers, but for the family members as well. Just like with drugs and alcohol, the families are affected by the gambling as well. I'd like to note that I am also a person in long-term recovery. I just celebrated 28 years back in August. I'm a father, a husband, and a pop-pop. Those are all important things to me.
You mentioned that you're from New Orleans, and you made your way here via the air, huh?
Yes, I joined the Air Force and was stationed in Dover Air Force Base. Did a little stint over in Italy, came back to Dover, and kind of got out and back into civilian life. Met a local girl and put down roots.
Okay. And the organization of which you're a part, can you talk a little bit about how it was developed and how old it is and so forth?
We've been around since the 70s, and our purpose is to provide education, prevention, and treatment services for everyone in Delaware. We have a school-based program where Judy McCormick and John Schmidt both go out to the middle schools and the high schools and do presentations. Until the pandemic hit, I had been in the state prison in Smyrna for over 20 years. I developed a treatment program for the incarcerated population. People might not assume, or may assume, that they're not gambling in prison, but that's one of the main activities that they get into. And while the currency may not be money, it takes the form of commissary, food, stamps, that sort of thing. So we try to cover the whole spectrum. We do trainings throughout the year, for professionals in the field. We offer this certification program. This year we will be doing a special certification program for the clergy members. I find often that clergy are not necessarily, they're kind of stumped. They're not quite sure what to say when it comes to the gambling. And from a faith-based perspective, I am a believer. From my study, there is no strict prohibition in the Bible that says thou shalt not gamble. But what I look at it from a faith-based perspective, is how are we being good stewards of what God's given us? How are you making the world a better place sitting in front of a slot machine? Just saying.
Now, if the council has been since the 70s, that would happen with the opening up of Atlantic City. One of the adages I remember was that the people who put Las Vegas up had the decency to put it in the desert where only so many people could get there. And Atlantic City was within driving distance of something like a quarter of the American population.
Yes.
Now, since that time, we've got gambling in other states. We've got gambling online. And I think one of the things that concerns people, particularly people of faith, is the proliferation of advertising.
Yes.
And the easy access to gambling and the problems that obviously would cause.
Well, you hit upon a great concept, and I call it availability. If the only casino were Las Vegas, the problem wouldn't be what it is here locally. You'd have to board a plane and go out there, just like the drug problem. If you were a heroin addict and you had to go to Utah to get your heroin, we probably wouldn't have this opiate epidemic that we have. But it's availability. There's 3 casinos in little tiny Delaware. They're in neighboring states, and as you said, gambling is morphed and changed. It's online. You never even have to get up out of your bed when you wake up to get started. If you have some sort of a device, you can gamble. We've got lottery tickets, and now we have esports. You don't even have to bet. You've got the fantasy sports, where it's not even about the outcome of the game itself. You're picking player performance and that sort of thing. What's on the rise now is, if you take the B and the L out of gambling, you have gaming. So it should be a concern for parents, to watch and be educated about what their children are engaged in. There are a lot of games that, one is called Grand Theft Auto, where you get extra points for shooting people and raping people and doing drugs. And a lot of times, I don't think parents are quite aware of what their children are engaged in. Growing up in my generation, the babysitter seemed to be the TV. Well, that's kind of changed. Now it's video games and so forth. And you've got a multitude of devices from which, to engage in these activities. So it's changing, forever changing, and they're 3 steps ahead of, the treatment people. You cannot escape it. Every year when I file my taxes at H&R Block, when I'm done, there's a little scratch-off thing to see if you get your taxes done for free or if you win a prize. It's everywhere. What we've been a little more conscious about here lately, with the past holiday season, is responsible gifting. It's probably not the best idea to give children lottery tickets for Christmas presents. Just saying, give them a real present. And then they start to believe that this is like normal behavior. This is kind of what we do.
Socks and underwear is what I got when I was a kid.
Yeah. Or a piece of coal. I do want to make one statement, just to put this out here. Our agency, the Delaware Council on Gambling Problems, we are a gambling neutral organization, neither for nor against. If you're going to gamble, that's fine. But can you do it in a regulated fashion, where this is recreational? Can you take your $40, do what you do with it, and then leave? For some folks, the 40 becomes 100, 100 becomes 200, and there's a progression. And what I've been trying to educate people about, within the last 7 years as I'm going around to all these agencies, is that gambling, it's the same animal, just dressed up in different clothes. There's a lot of similarities. Of course, there's differences. And the two biggest differences are you're not ingesting anything like a drink or a substance into your body, but it affects the brain in a similar fashion. The most insidious difference to me is that there is no overdose from gambling. And what I mean is simply this, and I'll ask the good pastor. If I were to give you $100,000 and you had 30 days, do you think you can drink that much alcohol in a month? $100,000?
Boy, that's a lot of beer for a German guy like me.
And the answer is no.
Sure.
Yeah, you can't. You'll die. Likewise, you cannot use that much heroin in a month. You will overdose and die. So when I ask my clients or people at these agencies, can you spend $100,000 in 30 days gambling and without missing a beat? They all say, well, of course. It's very deceptive. A client came to me about half a year ago, and she really didn't want to see me, and that's fine. She was prompted by her husband. There was this, she wanted to appease him because he was threatening divorce. I don't have a gambling problem. I said, okay. What kind of gambling do you do? Well, I play the slots. I said, all right. For someone to tell you you have a problem, you're probably not going to listen. I have to get them to where they can see it themselves.
Sure.
Addiction is the only illness that has to be self-diagnosed. Everyone can tell you have a problem, but until you get it, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. So I asked her to get out her cell phone. I said, go to the calculator function, please. And I said, what kind of, you said slot machines, correct? She said, yes. I said, how do you play it? She said, I'm just playing the penny machine. And I said, I don't think that's the case. I said, I know you just got here, but just go with me. There's what they call max play. It's a penny machine, but you can play, you can maximize your bet up to several dollars. And I said, you're playing max play. And she said, yes, I am. I said, how much is that? $2. So it's not the penny machine, it's the $2 machine every time you hit the button.
Mm-hmm.
I said, how many times do you hit the button in a minute? About 10 times. How many minutes are in an hour? I said, multiply that by 60. How many hours were you there the last time? 4. So playing the penny machines, we have this tendency to minimize things so that we don't have to look at the truth, because the truth is painful. $4,800 in 4 hours was her penny machine. Looking at that, she got a realization, maybe this is bigger than I thought. And I said, we can continue to go on if you like. How many times a week do you do this? 3. So do the math. How many weeks are in a year? 52. So, yeah, about 250,000 I said, maybe now you might understand why your husband's a little angry. Yeah. So then she got it. And then she bought in. And she's actually doing wonderful now.
Hector, I'm going to admit a certain naivete. I grew up in a railroad town outside Pittsburgh. And one of the entertainments when we were growing up was pool.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 10 cents a game, and whoever lost paid. And we never thought of that as any kind of a money maker. It was simply entertainment.
Yes.
But in that context, again, a railroad town, when the railroaders got their checks, inevitably, and that was predictable, by the way, and inevitably, they would come in there, and Johnny, who was his name, was the fellow who ran the pool hall, and he had his slips under the mat on his counter. And I sort of grew up around that with a notion, of despising it. It never felt to me like something I would want to participate in.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'm not real sure to this day that I understand, in the sense that I sort of get the addictive aspect and how that mushrooms and gets worse and worse and worse, along with, of course, other addictions. But I'm not real sure I understand why people get into it. Is it, in your mind and in your experience, really something that they hope to make a fortune on and go to the south of France for the vacations? Is it ongoing entertainment? Is it the challenge? Is it all of the above?
And I'll say it is all the above. While it's very simple, it's a gambling issue, it's very complex. There are a lot of reasons why people get into gambling. For my senior population, and I find this a lot, it's pretty consistent across the board. We live in a country where we still subscribe to that post-World War II mindset. You work hard and then you retire and enjoy your life. Is that really what our current world is about? Where we respect our elders? And no, it's about being quick and beautiful and, your little, not even 15 minutes of fame, 15 seconds, online on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. So if I'm some 60-something-year-old person and I just lost my husband, and I'm kind of referencing someone I saw in the past several years ago. She said, it gave me no consolation to sit at home looking at all these pictures on the wall of this man I spent the majority of my life with. It was just sad. So where could I go where they valet park my car and they act like they're glad to see me, and they give me my little Diet Coke, and they give me free play, $30 of free play. We all need three things, like we need oxygen to live: attention, affection, and validation. And they sort of give all of it to you in these environments. But it's really not genuine. And when she lost everything, the home that she owned, and was living in a car, that's not a good look for grandma, living in a car in the winter.
And I'm absolutely certain that most people who hear us talking don't realize how often that kind of thing happens.
Yes. I think it's very simple. People are lonely. And especially in this pandemic time, we're not as connected as we once were. And I know we have Zoom and we're doing this group via, those are great and they're better than nothing, but it's not the same thing. We're social beings and we need attention. We need this socialization, and people are lonely. And you go there and they just make you feel so welcome. On another note, the younger folks, it's part of the culture almost for young guys to bet on football and sports. They're kind of geared. This has been normalized now. And people have been playing video games for quite some time now, and the average age of a video gamer now is in 30s, not, teenagers. But there's a lot of gambling that's going on the gaming. Now, it may not make sense to me because I'm not a video game player, but my grandson likes it.
Gotcha.
So I have to monitor him and just, it's fascinating. He's taught me more about that just by sitting with him and watching him than any course I've taken.
Is there not, and I'm just asking, is there not some competition between, especially, let's say, teenage kids in terms of playing a game? Don't they communicate with one another in a way?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's not just Johnny sitting in his
No.
room playing. He may have partners or
Oh, yes.
competitors or whatever somewhere. And
And the
all
verb-
over the country.
Yes, and all over the world. You could be anywhere. If you're some 9th or 10th grader and you happen to be overweight, got a bunch of pimples and not popular with the girls and not very good at sports, you're not fitting in, you can go home and get on your video game and reinvent yourself and become a rock star. And you have, 875 friends who follow you. This is a huge development in gaming. There's actually sold out stadiums where they have conventions to watch tournaments of people playing video games.
Amazing.
And in colleges now, they're offering scholarships in esports. University of Delaware, I think, has one.
Let me backtrack
Yes, sir.
perhaps a bunch of years, and I don't know how many. But it seems to me that the whole business of sociability, which is important. I mean, where you get it
Yes.
matters, but that you need it is a given, was satisfied historically for a relatively large segment of the population with bingo.
Huh.
And my mother, who was as frugal a person as I've ever met, seriously, I mean, she misplaced a $20 bill 60 years ago, and I know that's 60 years ago, but $20 60 years ago
Yes.
was not insignificant, and that may have been half the rent. And we lived in rental apartments when I was growing up. Most of my peers did as well. And I remember the hysteria. She made the lady in the Bible who lost the coin look like,
Yes.
but she also went to bingo issues. Not every day or every week or anything like that. But she had her boundary. It may have been $3 or something like
But
that.
there's a social aspect to
Sure,
that.
absolutely.
Is it gambling, or is it I'm at church with the people I know and we're engaged in some activity that is relatively fun and won't bankrupt me? Now, there are people who play bingo who've got 20 cards and a big marker, and anything in excess, no matter what it is probably bad.
Sure.
But in that sense, what she was engaged in was something social.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But is there a connection between that kind of gambling and the jump, maybe a leap into some of the other kind of things that we talk about? Is there a connection? Do people who get used to bingo have a penchant for getting bigger than bingo?
That is possible. It's just like when I talk about addiction, I'm kind of interchangeably talking gambling, drugs, alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And people will change the substances that they use depending upon availability.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not have that available anymore, what are you going to do? I will use something else to change how I feel. What this whole addiction thing is for me, It's not very scientific, but it makes a lot of sense to me and the people that I work with. I call it the hole in the soul. Something is missing. And if my reality isn't what I'd like it to be, if where I'm at isn't where I want to be, what can I do to change how I feel? Instantly. If you were to drink 12 ounces of vodka right now, I don't believe it would take 6 months for that to kick in. It's relatively quick.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same thing happens with drugs. It's relatively quick. We engage in these activities because they work. And you can change how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a short-sighted solution that only compounds the problem over time. A lot of people are struggling and they don't have the supports or the ability to, or the vision to look at like the 5-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the next 5 seconds in front of my face. And if I'm distressed or anxious or afraid, especially talking about these times that we're living in now, with all the political turmoil and COVID, where can I go where I can escape all this? And gambling works.
You mentioned COVID, and I think that's probably what also occasioned the question here.
Yes.
Has it been gauged how much of an effect being stuck in home basically has increased, presumably, the gambling online, especially?
I can only speak anecdotally, from my experiences
Sure.
that I see. But it's a definitive yes to me. Again, I don't want to stay stuck in this place where I'm at. It's uncomfortable. We live in a society where no one wants to be uncomfortable. Everyone has to be happy all the time, and that's not realistic. God gave us an array of emotions.
Sure.
And a tear duct for a purpose. It's okay to cry sometimes. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to engage in any of it. And if I can get in that zone, I don't have to think of anything. I'll just point out a few other things. There's what I call the fantasy versus reality aspects of gambling. When you look at the commercials on TV, if you ever catch these, from any casino in the area, what do you see? People are happy. Yep. They look wonderful. Grandmom's hooping and hollering and jumping up and down, and the commercials always say, the place to be a winner, and that's where we all want to be. We don't want to be losers. Those are not the people that I see, the people in the commercials. When they finally call for help, it's not pretty. And within this, since the pandemic has started, I have had more people with suicidal ideation who just wanted to jump off the bridge, so to speak. And the reason why the suicidal ideation is higher with gamblers than any other group is because you can go through the money so quickly. As I said previously, you cannot spend $100,000 in a month doing heroin. You and I together can't do that. But you could easily do that gambling. They give you free play. It's kind of like the drug dealer giving you a sample.
Sure.
Here, try this. But it kind of makes you feel special. There's the phone call I like to do, if I can. And the casino calls me, and I answer my phone. It's ringing. Hello? Hi, is this Mr. Garcia? Yes, it is. Who's calling? This is Dover Downs. I'll just use that as an example. Or Delaware Park, or whatever casino. You're such a valuable customer that we're offering you a free room for you and a guest for the weekend. Oh my goodness. I'm feeling really special. Someone has finally recognized, yeah. But that's not what they said. They were speaking English, but I have to translate it into real speak.
Sure.
Here's how the conversation actually went. Phone rings and I answer it. Hello. Hi, is this Mr. Garcia? Yes, it is. Yes, this is such and such casino, and we realize you're such a pathetic loser that we're going to offer you this free room for the weekend. We know that you'll never even make it up to the room, and we won't even have to send housekeeping to change anything. Hurry up, sucker. That's what they said. You just didn't catch it.
Sure. Hector, I've got just a couple questions
Yes, sir.
before we're done. And also, I want to give you time to catch up on anything that we missed. But it would seem like this is just, especially now, shoveling against the tide. I mean, there simply has to be so much of this that how do you even begin to address the volume of things that we're dealing with?
Well, it is everywhere. You cannot escape it. Gambling is everywhere. There's almost an oversaturation. The availability is endless. All I can do as an individual is it starts with me in my home. And I really could care less what's popular or fashionable. Being a person of faith, we could say is not fashionable or popular. But we stand our ground, and in this family, this is what we do. And we have to be the role models. It is not going away. It continues to evolve and expand. But we just need to be educate ourselves about what our children are doing, our grandchildren are doing online, because it's morphing and changing and will then impact them as well.
Sure. I suspect that the family that's able to set their boundaries and express themselves in terms of where they're simply not going to allow themselves to go, whether it be gambling or some other issue, still might have a cousin or brother or sister or whatever who hasn't set those boundaries.
Right.
And you either end up in a supportive role of their problem or end up broke yourself. I'm just stating that as the obvious. I believe you'd affirm that. My second issue, B, is does this kind of dynamic, as it relates to gambling, not the alcohol and occur in Europe, in Asia, and so forth? So gambling is not simply an American issue.
Oh, no. It is a global phenomenon.
Gotcha. Okay.
It is everywhere. Again, you can't escape it. It doesn't matter what country or what culture you're a part of. There are cultural differences.
There are different forms it takes.
I'll point one out. When I'm talking about or asking about playing cards, for the most part, if I'm dealing with white people, it's poker or blackjack. When I'm dealing with African Americans, people of color, it may not be that. It's pitty-pat, spades, tonk, and bid whist. So there's games that are more, depending on the culture. And some cultures don't even look at, like, playing a lottery ticket as gambling. It's just kind of what we do. So it's prevalent. It's not going away. It's expanding. That's why we're here. That's why we're not going away.
Well, I hope not. And that's my last question. C is, how are you funded?
We're funded through the state. 1% of what the casinos makes gets targeted for treatment, for gambling, and they also use some of that money for drugs and alcohol as well. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, and it's really not that much. But that pays for all the services that we do, our school programs, our prison programs, the providers that do the treatment, all our educational prevention services. And we're a tiny group of about 8 to 10, but we do a lot of work.
I'm sure you do. How about, are you in touch with, and is there networking with Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland? And is that kind of thing happening?
Yes, and there's a national council. We are a state affiliate, the Delaware Council on Gambling Problems. Pennsylvania has one, every state has one. And then there's the National Council on Problem Gambling. They oversee everything. But we're all independent. And Delaware actually has more resources than a whole lot of states.
Wow.
You know, we've got a 24-hour hotline that anyone can call, and you get a live person. And as I said before, services are not just offered to people who live in Delaware, but to people who gamble in Delaware. So you could be living across the state line in Pennsylvania, but you go to Delaware Park to gamble, you are still afforded services for treatment.
Anything in closing that you would either like to bring up that you haven't, or that is a review that you think we could be chewing on in our own lives?
Well, I was ecstatic when I found out about this opportunity, because it just showed me that some clergy are starting to become aware of this. We actually have a faith-based training every year where clergy from throughout the state come. But there needs to be more follow-up, and I think people need to be talking about this in church. My joke is, if you talk about this with your congregation, you might get your tithe, that 10%. Right now, the casino's getting 70%. So, I don't know if you found that funny or not.
Hey, and you mentioned that there's no scriptural reference to thou shalt not gamble. However, in the Proverbs, there's at least a number of places, and in the wisdom literature generally, where it says money hastily gotten, and of course that would have been in any form.
Yes.
Is not necessarily a benefit.
And that, I think, is where we need to start, those passages from Proverbs, and put the gambling spin on it. It's still applicable.
Sure.
Like in Islam, for example, there is a strict prohibition against gambling.
In either of the expressions?
Yes.
Okay. Hector, I've been informed of a number of things. That's hole in the soul. I'm going to use it.
Please do.
It's wonderful in a whole lot of different ways as a vivid example of just the human condition, I think. And certainly clergy and Christians need to be talking about, and are, about the human condition. But this is another angle. And I trust that our people have benefited from it and will as they look at it later. We get surprised at how some of the guests that we've had say they hear from people in Wisconsin and Texas that they haven't heard from in 30 years. So maybe some people in other places will pop in on this and benefit from it too. So I thank you for your time.
And if anyone has any questions, they're free to call our agency. And I will be leaving you information as far as how they can contact us, or they can go online, deproblemgambling.org, and look us up.
Excellent.
I can bring more literature with me. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to give us a call.
I'm glad you do what you do, and it sounds like you're doing it well in the face of an awful large problem. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure being here.
Again, people of St. Mark's, please, and guests for that matter, please continue to feed me ideas, and I will do my best to translate them into moments like this, which I'm sure you will benefit from. Thanks again. See you next time.